we need to be very clear about what we're talking about here, because already you're hearing the excuses. You know, Israel's just the same as the Palestinians, yin-yang, Israel causes tit for tat, eye for an eye, circle of violence and all that. We've even had race-baiting Senator Lydia Thorpe play that game. In fact, tweeting, "I stand with Palestine," complete with fake maps, supposedly illustrating Israel's guilt. I stand with Palestine after all this, and not with Israel, the victim of this horror. Lydia Thorpe is a special case. How on earth is she in Parliament? But let's be clear what we're talking about. We have to be with things like that, because so much now is going to change after the surprise invasion of Israel by Palestinian terrorists. There's so much, like this idea that the left, this idea that Labour has had for so long, that Israel's enemies are essentially reasonable. No, they're really like us. You know, if Israel's just nice enough, there will be peace. And if something bad has happened, obviously Israel's to blame because, you know. Well, let's rip that lie to pieces. I'll show you now what really happened. Now, I can't show you the worst. It's just too horrific for television. And some of you will think I'll still be showing too much. But we must understand, be crystal clear about what happened, because this attack was monstrous. It's unforgivable. And the people making excuses for it, or even cheering it on, are, well, I'm sorry, but they're monsters themselves. Now, this started when the terrorist group Hamas, this actually controls Gaza, which is home to 2 million Palestinians. It fired around 3,000 rockets into Israel and then sent in its terrorists to murder Jewish civilians, men, women, and even children, gunning them down at bus stops or in their cars or outside their homes or in their homes. More than 700 Israelis are dead. In fact, terrorists, some of them flying over in drones, attacked a music festival in Israel, murdering people in their cars and sending hundreds and hundreds of others fleeing, but not before the terrorists killed about 260 of them, just music lovers, including a German tourist whose half-naked and broken body was later paraded through Gaza in the back of a ute. Israeli women there were also kidnapped, like this one, and taken back to Gaza as hostages. Young men as well. And they were beaten on their way to captivity. Meanwhile, other terrorists combed towns and kibbutzes, shooting civilians, including a teenage girl, to the horror of what seems to be her family. And again, I must warn, this is distressing, but you have to know about it. Now, this horror, I'm afraid, is going to continue. Don't treat this story like, oh, that's what happened on the weekend and now counting the cost. Because think of all those hostages that these terrorists took. There's maybe 100 or more, the Israeli government thinks, including women and babies and children. Here's one of those children, by the way, a boy taken back to Gaza, and then mocked for the cameras and hit. Even elderly women were taken as hostages, and some then forced grotesquely to perform with the terrorists who'd taken them as if it's all a big joke. The question is, what will Hamas now do with those hostages? How can Israel rescue them? How many will survive? What's ahead? I mentioned Hamas. It is backed by Iran, an ally of Russia and of China. And the aim of them both, Hamas and Iran, is not peace with Israel at all. It is the destruction of Israel. And when the Hamas leader saw the footage of what his terrorists were doing in Israel, he smiled and he prayed in thanks to his God. Iran's president was also thrilled.
It is a manifestation of resistance and standing against the fake Zionist regime. The Palestinian people, the Palestinian soldiers, all Palestinian groups and the Islamic Ummah should really be congratulated for this victory.
So what now? Israel has promised punishment like never before. It's moving armoured vehicles to the border with Gaza, clearly readying for a land invasion, and has already been bombing buildings in Gaza used by Hamas and its terrorists. But what next? Well, for me, one thing is critical. What next is to listen to this brutality, to heed it, because it speaks. And what it says is that Gaza, a key part of Palestine, is ruled by people who hate Jews and will stop at nothing. These are people who prefer killing to peace and celebrate the kind of barbarities that have shown you, and even worse ones that I can't. People being shot, beaten to death. You can see it on video. The bodies of dead men and women being defiled. And until that culture of those people changes, who in the West could now seriously tell Israel to back down, compromise, be reasonable, be nicer to Hamas? Who can compromise with monsters like that?